The last beam went up at 4 in the afternoon. Jack had been on the scaffold since morning. His shirt was soaked through. His hands had splinter marks from the timber. He had not noticed either of these things until Bok Doong reached across the frame and gripped his forearm and said, "That's it. That's the last one." Jack looked up. The roof frame was complete. Every beam in place. Every joint fitted the way he had drawn it on paper 6 weeks ago in the middle of the night by candlelight when he could not sleep and needed something his hands could solve. "Back," Jack said. "I know," Bok Doong said. They stood there on the scaffold for a moment, two men who did not need to say the obvious thing, looking at a roof that was not yet a house but was already a home. Below them, Mrs. Ly was standing in the yard with both hands over her mouth. Tu Tien had been cooking since noon. She had made rice, braised pork, pickled mustard greens, a soup with river fish that Bak Doong had caught himself 3 days ago and kept in the outdoor tank specifically for this day. She had not told anyone she was doing this. She had simply started cooking, the way Tu Tien did most important things without announcement, without asking if it was the right time. Ly had helped where she could. She had washed the vegetables, sorted the herbs, stirred the soup when Tu Tien's back was turned. Her belly was very round now, 8 months and 2 weeks, by the doctor's last count. She moved slowly, one hand always drifting back to rest on the curve of her stomach, a habit so constant she no longer seemed aware she was doing it. "You should sit," Tu Tien said. "I'm fine, sister, Ly. I have been sitting for 3 days. My back hurts more from sitting than from standing." Tu Tien looked at her for a moment. Then she handed her a small bunch of herbs to sort and said nothing more, because she understood that kind of restlessness, the kind that comes not from energy but from wanting, just for one afternoon, to be useful. They ate on the ground under the new roof frame. No table, just mats spread on the packed earth, bowls passed hand to hand, the smell of fresh timber overhead mixing with the braised pork and river fish. The afternoon light came through the open frame in long slanted lines and landed on the food and the faces around it, and made everything look like something worth remembering. Mrs. Ly had not said much since the last beam went up. She kept looking at the frame above them. Once, when she thought no one was watching, she reached up and touched one of the lower beams with her fingertips just briefly, the way you touch something to make sure it's real. Bak Doong saw. He looked away quickly, but the tips of his ears had gone red. "This rice is perfect, Tu Tien," he said loudly. "The fish is better," Jack said. "The fish is from my tank." "Then the fish is perfect, and the rice is good." Tu Tien laughed. Mrs. Ly smiled. Ly looked at all of them, at the food, at the frame above, at the light, and for a moment her face held an expression that was very close to the one she had worn at the mountain village, dancing in the firelight with women she had not known existed 12 hours before. Something that was not quite happiness yet, but was the shape happiness leaves behind when it has been there long enough. "Sister," Ly said quietly. "Yes, thank you, for today." Tu Tien looked at her. "You helped cook." "That's not what I mean." Tu Tien did not answer. She just pressed Ly's hand once under the mat where no one could see. The sun went down slowly. Jack and Bak Doong sat on the low timber pile after the meal and talked about the next phase, the walls, the windows, the flooring. Bak Doong wanted local timber for the floors. Jack wanted the windows to be large enough to catch the morning light on both sides. They disagreed about the roof pitch for 20 minutes and then agreed on the same number they had started with, which was how most of their conversations ended. Mrs. Ly washed the bowls at the outdoor tap. Tu Tien dried them. They did not talk much. They had reached the kind of comfortable silence that takes years to build and feels like its own form of conversation. Ly was sitting on a low stool near the edge of the mat, one hand on her belly, watching the last of the light leave the sky. Then she made a sound. Not a word, not a cry, just a sound, short, sharp, cut off immediately as if she had tried to swallow it back. Tu Tien turned around. Let's hand was pressed flat against her stomach. Her face had gone the color of the timber boards, pale, drained, very still. It's probably nothing, Let said. Her voice was steady, too steady. How long? A pause. Since this afternoon, Ly said. I thought it was the usual pressure. The doctor said there would be pressure. Since this afternoon, Tu Tien set down the bowl. Ly. That was 4 hours ago. I didn't want to. Let stopped. Her hand tightened on her belly. I didn't want to interrupt the roof. Tu Tien crossed the yard in 4 steps. She crouched in front of Ly and took her face in both hands. Look at me, how far apart. Let's eyes were wide and glassy. Maybe 15 minutes. Maybe less now. Tu Tien stood up. She turned toward the timber pile. Jack. He heard it in her voice before she said anything else. He was already standing. The drive took 40 minutes. Jack drove. Tu Tien sat in the back with Let, one arm around her shoulders, the other hand timing on her phone. Mrs. Ly sat in the front passenger seat with her rosary moving steadily through her fingers and her eyes fixed on the road ahead, as if she could clear it by looking hard enough. Baek Dung followed in his own truck, headlights filling the rearview mirror the whole way. Ly did not make noise during the contractions. She pressed her lips together and breathed in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way the pamphlet from the clinic had shown her. She had read that pamphlet 4 times. Tu Tien knew because she had seen it folded into the inside pocket of Let's bag, worn soft at the creases from handling. You're doing well, Tu Tien said. It's earlier than they said, Let said between breaths. 2 weeks earlier. 2 weeks is not very early. What if she's not ready? She kicked at the mountain village. Tu Tien said. She has been ready. Let closed her eyes. Another contraction moved through her. Tu Tien felt it in the way Let's shoulder went rigid under her arm. 9 minutes since the last one. Then 8. Sister Tu Tien, Let said quietly when it passed. Yes. If something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. But if it does, tell her Let stopped. Start it again. Tell her that her mother tried, that she wanted her, that the wanting was real, even when everything else was hard. The car was quiet except for the engine and the road. Tu Tien tightened her arm around Let's shoulders. You can tell her yourself, she said. In about 2 hours. The hospital corridor smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, and the particular stillness of a building that runs on urgency, even in the quiet hours. The nurses took Ly at the door. They moved fast and certain, the way people move when they have done this 1,000 times and know exactly where the fear is and exactly how to work around it. One of them asked Tu Tien for the medical file. Tu Tien had it. She had been carrying it in her bag for 3 weeks without mentioning it to anyone. The door closed. Jack stood in the corridor with his hands at his sides. His shirt was still dusty from the scaffold. There was a splinter in his left palm he had not dealt with yet. He looked at the closed door. Mrs. Ly came to stand beside him. She did not say anything. She just stood there with her rosary and her steady breathing, and the particular kind of calm that old faith produces in people who have lived long enough to know that some things are not in anyone's hands. Baek Dung sat down on the bench across the corridor. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor. Tu Tien came back out through the door after 15 minutes. Her hands were clean. Her face was composed. She's in labor, she said. They say the baby is in the right position. They say it's progressing normally. And Jack said. She asked me to go back out here. She said. Tu Tien paused. Something moved briefly across her face. She said she didn't want us to wait where she couldn't see us, because then she would worry about us worrying about her. Nobody spoke for a moment. "That sounds like her, Mrs." Ly said softly. They waited. The corridor clock moved. Bakdung brought water from the machine at the end of the hall and handed cups to each of them without being asked. Mrs. Ly finished her rosary twice. Jack sat down at some point and did not remember sitting down. At 11:47, the door opened. A nurse stepped out, young, tired in the way of people at the end of a long shift. She looked at the four of them in the corridor, at Jack with his dusty shirt, at Tu Tien with her hands folded, at Mrs. Ly with her rosary, at Bakdung still leaning forward on the bench. "The mother is well," she said. "The baby is well." The breath that left the corridor then was the kind that a group of people only releases together when they have been holding it for the same reason without saying so. "Can we see her?" Tu Tien said. "In a little while. She's asking for you." The nurse paused. She looked at the group again. "She said to tell you she said the baby has her mother's eyes." Jack turned toward the wall. He stood there for a moment with his hand on the corridor wall and his head slightly bowed, and did not say anything. Tu Tien put her hand on his back. Mrs. Ly had both hands over her face, again not hiding, just holding. The way you hold your own face when it needs somewhere to rest. Bakdung stood up from the bench. He cleared his throat once. "Someone should go buy rice porridge," he said, "for after, she will be hungry." Nobody argued. It was the most useful thing anyone had said in 4 hours. Jack turned back around. His eyes were dry and his face was calm, and only Tu Tien, who knew every register of his stillness, could see what it had taken to make them so. He reached into his pocket. His phone was there. He pulled it out not to check messages, just to check the time. 11:49. There was a notification on the screen. Not a message, a missed call, from a number he did not recognize. Missed at 11:32 while they were all in the corridor, while the nurse was still inside, while none of them were thinking about anything except the closed door. The number had no name saved against it, but below the missed call, a single text had come through at 11:45, 2 minutes before the nurse walked out. Jack read it. He read it again. He put the phone back in his pocket. He looked at Tu Tien. She was helping Mrs. Ly into a chair and had not seen his face. He looked at the closed door where Let was, where the baby was, where the name Mit was waiting to be given or not given, depending on what an old woman on a mountain had meant when she said you came home with your mother. Then he looked back at the notification on his phone, which he had already closed, but could still read perfectly clearly in his memory. "I know who the father is. I know you do too. We need to talk before she leaves that hospital. H.